East Africa has had a long relationship with the BRICS countries. Take, for example, because Saudi Arabia is now joining, Ibn Battuta. Do you remember him from history? Yeah. He toured East Africa, he toured Kilwa. And he wrote about East Africa around about 1332. It's a long time ago. But before Vasco da Gama came here, I do not know whether you are aware of a certain mariner by the name of Zheng He from China. Yeah. he was sent by the emperor then of the Ming dynasty. He was given a fleet of junks, as they called them, to sail and, on voyages of discovery. On the fifth journey, they sailed down from India to the East African coast. It is said there was a storm, and I think three or so junks were lost. And the survivors were able to swim ashore somewhere in Lamu, Pate Island. And 600 years later, we have the descendants of those sailors in East Africa. So we have a strong and rather warm relationship with China. In fact, I believe, I could be wrong, we'll have to test this, but I believe at the time of the opening of the Lamu port, there could have been an official or semi-official visit to see some of those long lost.
Yes, there was something like that reported in the press. Indeed. I remember.
Yes. Yes. So we do have a long relationship with China on the East African coast. And of course, you know the Gedi ruins, where they have actually found porcelain, fine china. And we also have a very long relationship with India. Yeah. In fact, the founder of the Maratha Empire was a certain Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Okay. Yeah. And the Marathi people used to sail in dhows, by the way, all the way down to the East African coast. And of course, they came from Mumbai, which I believe was actually founded on a series of islands. And the larger of those islands, I think, was what was called Mumbai. And in their language, when they came to Mombasa, they would point at the island and say, "That's very like Mumbai." And so there was a corruption of the Indian word. I couldn't say the words, however, but something to the effect of Mumbaisa. Many believe that that is the route for Mombasa.
Oh, Mombasa, the town that is very much like Mumbai. Yes. So that is Mumbai also.
Yes, something like that.
Or the second Mumbai.
Yes. It was the island of war.
And who were the warring parties at the time?
Well, we know certainly that when Vasco da Gama traveled there in 1498, he had to weigh anchor very quickly to leave Mombasa after the lookouts saw certain people dive into the waters and swim towards his ships with knives in their mouths.
Were these the Omani Arabs settling in Mombasa?
They were local people. There's a whole host of, I could tell you the story of the Wazimba, for example, who went up the coast and ate everybody up.
Also, it is said.
Yes. So, essentially what I was driving at is the history between East Africa and some of the members of BRICS spans several generations, several centuries, in fact.
In fact, the question I wanted to ask, given that Kenya has neither applied to or been invited to join BRICS, does remaining out of BRICS have any impact on our relationship, say, with our traditional trading partners like India and China? Are we going to be affected in any way?
It's early days yet because, as you say, as we had said earlier, BRICS itself is information. It is still inviting new members. But what is critical is the trading relationships we have right now, quantifiably, with BRICS and now the BRICS Plus, represents well over 50% of Kenya's imports So there could be a strategic need for us to relate better. And it would help if we were all members of the same club.
Yes.
Yes.
One of the things that intrigues me is that BRICS is clearly becoming an axis. I don't know whether an axis of power or of trade. It's still going some sort of, shall we call it metamorphosis? And I don't know, in your view, what are the opportunities, perhaps the desirability for BRICS to formalize itself?
So, as we saw in South Africa, they have regular summits. And this is where the presidents of the 5 countries, or at least the leaders of the 5 countries, get together with their teams and begin that jaw process of understanding what this is going to look like. There is an appetite, however, and they are aware of it, and that is what we saw in South Africa, for other countries to join even as they are building. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, 6 new countries are now going to be put into this pot. 6 new countries are going to bring in, obviously, divergent views. There's going to be a lot more competition around the table. But I think they are congealing into a geopolitical bloc, with all that appertains to a geopolitical bloc.
Okay.
So geopolitical blocs may be about trade, for example, but they could be about cultural exchanges.
Okay.
They could be about security, and that is what is interesting. Security means that there is something that we can defend on a common basis. And that is what represents, in my opinion, a clear and present danger to the collective West.
So are they being more and more sidelined or isolated? It's like the rest of the world wants to evolve without them, without their oversight?
Without whose oversight?
The West, the collective West.
The history of the collective West is not a good history. These were the slaving powers, if you recall. These were the colonial powers. These are currently the neo-colonial powers. So when you see what is happening in Gabon, what we saw happening in Niger, are a direct consequence of the mishandling of peoples and nations by those who were in power. That power, it seems, is receding for whatever reason. Europe, for example, looks like it is dying, population-wise. And you remember that there is something we wish to talk about in terms of the populations of the Europeans, that the demographics don't look very good, okay?
In fact, according to Elon Musk, these are dire. They're actually dying out. According to him, that if the West doesn't take care of these demographies of theirs, there will be no Europe to talk about in the next 50 years.
Well, in many nations, we are already at a point of no return anyway. I'm going to make two suppositions over here. One, I was intrigued that Nigeria was not invited this time around when the summit was held in Africa. Why was that? I have a theory. It is because Nigeria could be bending to the will of the West in amassing troops to go and attack Niger. Now that goes quite contrary to what BRICS is all about, because BRICS is about non-interference, for instance. That is a credo, which means, therefore, where we've got a country whose will can be bent by outside forces to their will to go and protect what we know is wrong, then perhaps there could be a question of suitability.
In fact, the question I would ask,
yes,
for Nigeria to be asked to lead an ECOWAS force into their francophone namesake Niger, Nigeria itself has had more coups than most nations in Africa. Do they have the moral authority to go and try and reverse a coup in a neighboring state when they themselves...
I believe there's a lively debate taking place within Nigeria itself as we speak. However, now then, let's look at the East Africa situation. We already are aware within the East African community that Congo has indicated an interest in writing, as has Uganda.
In joining BRICS?
In joining BRICS.
And Congo was recently admitted into the East African community.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
So we already have the group of 20, okay? And the group of 20, well, it is actually 19 nations and a block of nations.
So we have 19 nations plus the European Union.
Correct.
So the group of 20 has double membership, isn't it?
Yes.
Because Italy, France, Germany are members of the G20 in their own right. And then the European Union, of which they are a part, is also a member of the G20.
But you see, and I think the answer to that would be that those nations that you have mentioned are already themselves members of the group of 7.
Yes.
So that is how that double count takes place. Notwithstanding that, however, the moral here is this, that the European Union, which is a non-state actor, yeah? The European Union is not a state.
It's a union. It's a union of states, but not quite like the United States.
So it represents 27 states, of which only 3 or 4 actually have membership. So there's a benefit that accrues to all the non-G7 states participating in G20 affairs. My consideration here is that there could be an opportunity to jump the gun, so to speak, or to jump the queue even, where the East African community, as a joint bid of all the nations that comprise the East African community, could actually seek membership at BRICS.
Okay.
Of BRICS, rather.
In that case, then, would we then be advocating for even the African trading blocs like COMESA, ECOWAS, and the EAC to join BRICS as trading blocs?
Are they intertwined as we are?
SADC possibly could be, the one that's led by the South African.
That is a possibility. That is a possibility. But again, we still would have to see, because we have no sentiments yet from this BRICS, so to speak, about how to join, for example, because there is no secretariat. There are no written rules that I'm aware of that define the criteria for one to approach them to become a member that I'm aware of. I could be wrong.
So if BRICS doesn't formalize itself, do you see it, the danger of it becoming a talk shop, photo op sort of summit?
No, it is beyond that. It is already, the proof of any pudding is putting your money where your mouth is.
Right.
So they have set up, for example, a development bank. It has been funded. So they have funded it.
Who are the funders of this development bank?
The 5 founding nations.
Aha.
Yes. So there is clearly a direction of travel that is leading to formalization. No doubt about that.
This bank, where is it headquartered?
I couldn't answer that question. I think it will be Shanghai.
In Shanghai.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think it will be in Shanghai. And it makes sense because that is really where money is being churned out right now through China's phenomenal economic growth.
I guess an interesting point to pick up in the next session about China and its influence in the world and in BRICS. Is it emerging as a sort of a natural, organic leader of BRICS, or is leadership not an important issue?
I don't think, in my opinion, that they seek to lead the world in the way the US has led the world. I don't see them going to advocate for Mandarin to be spoken, for example, or for Chinese pop to become the everyday music that our children listen to. No. In any case, who says we have to replicate? Leadership and different empires have actually all behaved very differently. Interesting.